Welcome to Chicago Indian Arts Podcast. I'm your host, Sarveshi Shukla, and a board member of Chicago Indian Arts, a platform dedicated to bringing the nuance of Indian civilization to the world. I want to start by telling you all how today's conversation came about, because that story really matters. My daughter Sharanya was gifted the Aru Shah books by our close family friends. And what started as reading turned into something a lot more than that. She began recording herself, reading each chapter, and then, just to encourage her, I started posting it on YouTube. Watching that happen as a parent, watching her confidence grow, her voice come through, her love for books take a hold in a way that was completely her own, I cannot put to words what that felt like as a parent. Our guest today is Roshani Chokshi. She's the award-winning New York Times bestselling author of the Aru Shah Pandava Quintet, the Gilded Wolves trilogy, the Star-Touched Queen duology, and The Last Tale of the Flower Bride, her adult debut that became #1 Sunday Times bestseller. Her most recent novel, The Swan's Daughter, published in January 2026, was a Good Morning America book club pick. Time magazine named Aru Shah and the End of Time one of the top 100 fantasy books of all time. Her books have been translated in over 24 languages. Paramount Pictures holds films right to Aru Shah. She has been nominated for both Nebula and Locus Awards. She was born and raised in Georgia. Her father, a Gujarati, her mother, a Filipino, both immigrants. She concentrated in 14th century British literature at Emory, sold her first novel while she was in law school at the University of Georgia, and dropped out full-time to write. When I wrote to Roshani and I told her the story of how my daughter put this together, that letter is the reason we are here today. So before I go any further, on behalf of my daughter and so many kids who found themselves in your pages, Roshani, thank you. You're welcome, and I would love to have our conversation today. It's a real honor.
Oh, thank you so much. That was a beautiful introduction, and I am so indebted to your daughter for taking the time to read Aru Shah, and I'm so delighted that it found a home in her heart.
Oh, thank you. So I want to start, I love starting with all our lovely writers at their origin stories, because I feel a lot of it gets reflected in the works that they put together. So like I was talking in our introduction, that you grew up in two different immigrant cultures with two different languages that your parents came from, and you grew up speaking English. Neither of the parents had that as their native language. So you've said that as a child, you read every fantasy book you could get your hands on, and never once did you see yourself or anyone who looked like you in those books. What was it loving a yawner that didn't love you back?
There were like very almost cameo appearances, right, of people who were similar to me or my family members. Like I think a lot about the Parvati and Padma Patel twins from the Harry Potter series. They are throwaways in many ways. Like they exist in a scene, but they don't have a lot of weight. And then you would think about how an Asian character would show up in a TV show as like the geeky best friend. I think a lot about Elaine from Gilmore Girls and characters like that who existed only to serve as a foil to a white protagonist. And the way that felt for me at the time, I wasn't even conscious about the amount of erasing that was going on. To be totally honest with you, my very first books that I wrote, they didn't even have characters that looked like me. There were characters, white girls named Erin or Sarah or something like that. And nothing wrong with those names. Those are gorgeous names. But it meant that I too was an active participant in my own erasure, that I saw no reason for me to exist on the page, and this was the closest I could get to it. When you're young, there is so much that you don't notice as a, like when it's all that you're exposed to, you just sort of take it for what it is, as entertainment, as escapist value. And it really wasn't until I got older that I became more and more aware that I wasn't on the page. And the way that that ended up making me feel, of course, was feeling bad or feeling rejected wasn't quite the same as the absolute panic of being invisible, And when you are a young person and you're figuring out your identity for the first time, you're figuring out who you are, your set of beliefs, the beliefs that have been passed down to you even, and you're at this point of a lot of interrogation of yourself. When you also don't see yourself represented in art, it almost makes it seem like anything that you do decide about yourself ultimately doesn't move the needle of the world. And that's a very hollowing feeling, to feel that you don't matter.
It's so touching what you said. And that observation has been something I've always held very closely. And I used to feel very strongly that why are we just embellishments? We are not a garnish in a story. Coming from a civilization as rich as ours, it's so reductive to see how it's put together for the world. But it's immense work that you and people like you have done so that my kids now see themselves in that story. And that's more special than I can ever put in words for you. So thank you for doing that. It matters. So your grandmother told you stories from the Mahabharata and Ramayana, the Sanskrit epics, long before you encountered them on the page. You received that tradition in her voice. And I want to share with you that inspired me today to wear this the skirt and the scarf that's made out of my grandmother's sari, and it's over a
Beautiful. I've been admiring it the whole time. I love it.
Thank you. And it is over 75 years old at this point, and she's long gone, but her pieces live with me. So I was like, when I was reading this, I said, I want to bring her here with me today. So I wanted to know, what does it mean to carry something that way in the way you learned about these stories and then put it forward?
I'm sure this is resonant for many, many first generation and second generation American experiences. But our greatest heirloom are stories and also superstitions. It doesn't, sometimes there's this idea with the immigrant novel or the way that it informs everything that it has to be noble and tragic.
Right.
Sometimes it's just silly, like my ba telling me not to walk too loudly or I'm going to lose money. Who told you that? What? And then also, I'm 8. Girl, I've got no money. And like, what money is there to lose? I don't understand.
I love that. Yes, that's true.
Things like that I was like, but what are we talking about? Or, I remember, well, it's my husband too. Like the older that we get, the more superstitious we
Yes.
become. So, and I tease him all the time, but I call him Madam Sharma. He's the fanciest, most high maintenance person in the world. And one time, he was joking. Like, he's just like, I think I look too good today. I was like, let me nuzzle you. You're too beautiful. Like, what do you want me to do? Anyway, things like that, that make me laugh, that I think are part of those traditions of the things that are passed down. I think, though, something that stands out a lot is how that inheritance of story and superstition has really, it's informed every part of my life. Like, for example, my parents, obviously, they named me Roshni. And then my little brother, he can very easily go by the nickname Jay. His name is Jayesh. But my sister's name is Monica. And
imagine.
That's so disrespectful. Like, why would you saddle me with this unpronounceable name? And we live in the deep South, and you gave her the name Monica. And I can't tell you how upset this has made me for, I don't even know, 30 something years. But there's a reason and why my sister has that name. And it's because when she was born, she was very sick. At the time when my mom was pregnant, they didn't test her for beta strep, which is now very common that they test you for in labor. So she got sick, my sister got sick, and there was a concern that my sister may not make it.
Oh
And
my God.
so I can't remember which grandmother it was, either my Indian grandmother or my Filipino grandmother. One of these grandmothers said to change the baby's name so that death would not find her.
Oh,
And
I can imagine that is such a
yeah,
sweet thing.
Monica's fine. She's more than fine. She's thriving. She's out in Seattle, goes on a hike every day. She's even married. We're all shocked. Just kidding with that. And so that's one example of how those heirloom of stories has informed so much.
This is so funny and so relatable in so many ways. I can hear you. I relate to your story just now on multiple accounts. I'm Sarveshi. I mean, you can only imagine what was happening to my name. And I grew up in India and I used to dread telling my name there. And I was like, why couldn't I have been a Neha or a Priya? Like you had
Why
so
couldn't I have
many.
been in there?
I was like, come on, like why? Who asked you to go like so special and unique? I didn't want to be. And
Oh,
it's
it's a
much
beautiful
later.
name.
Thank you. It's much later. In fact, only after I met my husband that he said he liked my name. Otherwise, I've gone through my entire life hating it. I was like, oh, what am I doing? And names carry such a weight. Like when I was naming my kids, it went through like this whole process. I think more than my pregnancy, naming them was the difficult aspect of it. That, I wanted it to be rooted, but I didn't want their names to be made fun of. And, oh my God. So funny. Everything that you shared, I relate to on every account. So sweet. So you sold your first novel when you were in law school. You moved back home, gave yourself 1 year to make it work. Your parents believed in you, but the aunties of the community probably did not. And I think I've read somewhere that you described that treatment of you as they had put you out as a cautionary tale that, oh my God, now what to do? The typical clear Indian careers of medicine and law and now at least technology, you dropped out of it. Oh my God, like what is happening? So I know that pressure and I wanted to know, how did you hold your nerve throughout all of this?
The answer is it's very corny, but I
We'll
was
take it.
okay because I never doubted that I was loved. I never
That's
doubted that I would always have a safe landing. And I can't emphasize what a gift that is for, like, I think now that I have children of my own and you see the treatment of children around the world, what other kids in other countries are dealing with, to grow up and never, ever doubt for a second that you are loved, that no matter what you do, there is nothing you can do to lose the love of your family, is what makes you feel truly invincible. It gives you wings. And it's not just my family support, although that was so much of it, but also the fact that I was with my high school sweetheart still, who's now my husband. And we've been together since we were 15 years old.
Oh,
And
congratulations. That's amazing.
yes, and that itself was a very dramatic thing. And, the Indian community, oh my God, she's dating and blah, blah, blah. And it's this, being a teenager and having
Yeah.
immigrant parents is tough. I I really feel for teens these days because everyone has like the tracking thing on their phone that tells you where you are. Nothing was worse in my teenage years than sneaking outside of my house and getting a call at midnight from my dad, just completely stone cold calm. Where are you right now? Like just, run at just terrible time. So in many ways, I had plenty of experience and practice with just frankly doing all the wrong things and being looked at sideways and blah, blah, blah. But I understand why the community had felt that at the time. It's because how can you not? When you cast judgment, I think, or I choose to believe that it is an extension of love and wanting to keep the people that you love safe.
Right.
When you get shamed for something, most of the time it's not out of malice. It's out of, I don't want to see something bad happen to you. If you act a certain way, this might happen to you because we've seen it from whatever experience or whatever stories, and we don't want that to touch you. And I get that. But again, I was loved and I still am, and that made me quite fearless.
That is a very poignant thing for everyone to know, that you had this safe space and this very deep understanding that no matter what, they're there. They've got your back. And I think as a parent, I feel that that's my utmost responsibility to create that for my kids. And I was fortunate enough to have loving parents like that as well. So I can completely understand what that means. And what you just said is what leads me to our next question, that, when you were sneaking out and when you were, according to them, not doing the right things. So Aru Shah, she's 12 years old. She lies to fit in. She lights the lamp she was told never to touch. And then she finds out that her father is the villain she has to stop. That's the character I think Sharanya fell in love with. I had initially thought I'll ask you, where does that character come from? But I think now I want to know how much of that character is channeling what you've seen. How much of it is you?
Well, I'm very sad to admit that I am not a demigod and I don't have a lightning bolt weapon.
I was hoping you would say there is.
Yeah, I would say there's some major differences between me and Aru Shah. But I did give her a lot of myself at that age. I also was often in trouble for being caught in a lie or telling too big of a story. And I wasn't a really spectacular student. And I just liked running around with my friends. I liked clowning around with them, if you can't tell. And I think, the biggest thing that I gave Aru and what so naturally lent itself from the source material was her sense of doubt and uncertainty. I think all the time about the conversation that Arjun has with Krishna on the battlefield, the basis of the Gita.
Right.
And that whole thing of just, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if what I'm doing is right. I take one step and it's me. I'm just, it seems like there are an endless number of ways to be unhappy. But the flip side of that is that there are an infinite number of ways to be happy and to find contentment. So those are some of the biggest things that I gave to Aru. I will say, though, that, beyond the philosophical dilemmas that Aru experiences, some of the most mortifying moments in my existence I have given to her, because I just, I think sometimes one of the great things about being a children's book author is that you get to revisit the trauma of childhood just constantly and play around with it and make it better and fix it. And then somebody pays you to do it. That's crazy. How much fun. But I just remember it was a tough time in middle school and high school. And I'm sure, I don't know how many brown girls this is going to resonate with, but the worst thing my dad ever did to me was that he wouldn't let me wax my mustache. It was horrible. And I had a mustache faster than all these white boys in my class. It was horrifying. It was a bad time to be me. And my best friend, she was like, listen, I got you. I was like, all right, fix it. So she bought Nair. I don't know if anybody listening doesn't know what Nair is, then okay, you're one of God's chosen and we don't have anything in common. But Nair is this this hair depilatory cream. The thing about it is that you're only supposed to leave it on for like 5 minutes maximum.
Yes.
My best friend was an idiot like me and left it on for 10 minutes. So I had like these chemical burns, Groucho Marx mustache, whatever things. And I had to go home and my dad was just like, oh, bop or bop. Like, we thought maybe you'd grow up and be pretty, but now look at you. I'm like, oh my God, just traumatized. And I had to go to school like that with just like, what, you can't even say that you fell on the sidewalk. How would you do that?
It can't.
How would you possibly, like, that's the dumbest way. So a lot. I mean, I think you can tell from talking with me, there's so much pain in my young life that I've just had to constantly go back to and fix. And then having crushes, oh God, just destroyed me. This one time, when I was right before ninth grade, yeah, right before high school started, and I was in pre-debate camp. I saw this guy that our whole neighborhood had been talking about because his family had moved in and I'd watched his house being built. There's all this gossip, how smart he is, how smart his family is. Everybody's a doctor. Everybody gets straight A's. Roshani, you've never seen a straight A if it smacked you upside the head at midnight, blah, 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 blah. And I thought he would look like such a dork, but he was beautiful. And I was like, oh my goodness. You have one of those Bollywood moments. You want like a dupatta to come and blow around your face,
And you
just
just
all sorts of stuff. Yeah. And like everyone's going to just start dancing in the street immediately. And we're all going to know the right steps. And because I'm, again, a fool, I yelled at him really loudly, hey, I know where you live, like that. And, that's like that was a really unhinged and rather psychotic thing to say to somebody. And we had to like carpool for a year together, and he never spoke to me. And every single time I looked at him, I just wanted the earth to unzip and to just like put myself in it.
You.
Like how Sita gets out of Ayodhya at the end. I was like, just get me out of here. And we're married now. We have 2 kids, but it was still like a really traumatic way to start things.
So he was the one you had a crush on, your current husband?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that is so cute. That's one of the cutest love stories I've heard. Oh my God. I tell you, I think this is our 7th episode we are recording. And I haven't laughed this hard throughout in any of this. This is so amazing to hear. Oh my God. And I know the Nair. I know all of those, something was on with our previous generation and they not wanting any beauty treatments to be done on us. I mean, I had similar waxing stories, which are for another day, which was like, I would go out of the house and I was in sports all the time in shorts, and I was like, I don't want to look like a bear myself. Like, what are you doing? And what problem do you have? So it's so unexplainable. So at least with my daughter, I was like, I know the moment you want to do it, I will personally support you on this mission. We will change this generational trauma. It ends with me. Oh my God, this is so funny. Wow. Looking across all your books, Maya, Gauri, Leila, Aru, Demelza, there's a figure who keeps returning, a young woman who's been told she's dangerous or broken or fated for destruction and who refuses those terms. Is that something that you kind of consciously, deliberately built out? Or is it something that you now go and look back and be like, oh, interesting, this character ultimately shaped up to do this?
I had this light bulb moment when I was reading through, you sent us notes beforehand, and I was just so struck by the thoughtfulness of every question. But when I got to that one, I had a moment of like, oh my God, I don't think I've ever noticed that before on my own characters. I'm not sure what that says about me. No. I'll bring it up to my next therapist. So, but no, I don't think about it consciously. But I think I'm always drawn to that sort of character. And I think, especially in children's literature and young adult literature, this is a universal feeling. Every person can relate to standing on the outside of the room and wondering if they're where they're supposed to be, or if people can perceive them. Every story, in my opinion, that's worth telling is a love story. But that doesn't mean it has to be a romance. Sometimes it's the journey of self-love. It's arriving at a point where you believe that you are worthy of love, or protecting something or people or an idea, belief, faith, whatever that you love. And so that's often where my characters come from, that emotional sense.
Love it. This is so amazing. Good to know. Something I noticed across your book is also that magic genuinely carries the argument of the book. In Aru Shah, the Vajra only activates from who Aru actually is inside. In Swan's Daughter, Demelza's truth-telling is logged until she is most vulnerable. How consciously do you build that part of the aspect of the story?
Pretty consciously. I think there's often so much pressure for something to seem original or to have the most sparkling prose or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, if it fails to make you feel anything, it hasn't succeeded, right? So even aspects of magic, they have to come from a place that's emotionally fraught in order for it to resonate a lot. So that's certainly, and that's at least how I consider it.
That's a beautiful way to think of it. And it's so nicely intertwined in the story that as we are reading it, you're in that realm. And I think that's the beauty and success of reading a fiction like that. And I have loved reading it, being a full-grown adult. So I think that's beautiful the way it carries. I wanted to talk about our literature festival. It's on May 30th, and we have multiple things happening on that day. We've got children's programming, we've got writers' workshop, we have video games telling our ancient stories, and we have a lot of things planned for the whole day. But the children's programming, like I talked about, the part that starts the whole day hasn't been an afterthought. It has been something that was very core to Jigar, the founder of our organization. He, similar to what you were saying, grew up listening to stories, grew up looking at these things. And then coming here, we saw the lack of it. You were one of the first published authors under Rick Riordan Presence. You brought the stories of Mahabharata and the Hindu classical tradition to American children before there was any template for doing that. If a child walks into one of those sessions on Chicago Indian Literature Festival, what would you hope is one thing that they carry with them as they leave that session?
I would hope that they always carry a sense of curiosity, of fearless curiosity. There's this idea that our ancient texts are written in stone and that we have to maintain a distance from them because they do also inhabit what is sacred to us. But they have existed for so long because these texts and stories are ferociously alive. They want you to play with them. They want you to ask questions. They can withstand your interrogation. And I think for writers of any age, there is no point at which a story has reached its expiration date and can no longer give you anything. Go back to it. Ask another question. Say, why? Why this? Why that? Who made this choice? How might that have felt if I was that person? And I think more than anything these days, when it seems like answers are so readily available to us because of AI or something else, and you can just throw in a question and just have everything before you, curiosity may seem like an antiquated tool, but it's not. It's the way that we continue to relate to other people, to relate to the past, to reimagine the future. And it's curiosity that keeps stories alive. And so that's what I really hope any person would take away from it.
That's such a profound answer because I think the part that stayed with me was don't look at these stories from a distance. And interrogation is a part of the philosophy and the civilization we grew up with, that you are allowed to ask these questions and to not maintain that distance and take it and ask and evolve it. That's fascinating and such a lovely thing for kids to have. Like, yes, go in with the curiosity and leave with, I can do something with it. Oh, love it. This next question is very personal to me in terms of what I see as a parent for my kids. And I would love to know it from your perspective. You've spoken about knowing your parents' cultures in English at a distance. So, like the inheritance in translation. When you write these stories for children who carry the same distance, how do you honor what might be missing without pretending it's not there? I mean, I just would love to know. It's important to me. My kids can't speak Hindi, and I keep on pestering them from time to time, but the onus of it is with me, hoping one day they'll learn. But I want to know it from you, from your experience.
My first interaction with a lot of these stories, part of it was a huge part of it was my grandmother, my ba, would tell me everything. And she would also translate, shloks to me when we would go. So my grandparents were in Reading, Pennsylvania, which is where my father grew up. And in Reading, Pennsylvania, we have a really, really big, Bush Marg community, and we have the Vrudge, which is, I don't even know how to describe it. It's beautiful. The Vrudge is a beautiful temple. And when you're little, you hear some of these shloks and they function even as lullabies, like Adaram, Maduram. Like even as
Yes,
a kid, you always know how to clap to it. And like you may
right.
not know the order of the lyrics, but you always know how to Zakira, Maduram. And then what does it mean? And someone
Yeah.
will tell you. I don't I think that in that translation, I may lose nuance, but I still capture the spirit of something.
Hmm.
And I have to be okay with that. I accept that distance. I accept that the way in which this song, for example, or story has found me across thousands of miles and thousands of years is going to impact me differently than it would someone who grew up, for say, in Vrodra, where my parents are from, or my dad is from. Just like the stories that my mom heard in the Philippines are going to be very different when you change the translation, when you lose that local texture and atmosphere and fragrance of built-in knowledge. Um, and I do think that that is something that's an understandable point of grief. But from that absence, you also are allowed to make something, if not new, then you can shine a light on it in a different way, in a way that only you can. So acknowledge it, yes, that it's a double-edged sword. You lose something, you will always be in the shadows, but you also have something that can cut a new light into it, and that's also worthwhile.
I never thought of it this way. This is so important that yeah, I think having them or allowing them that own interpretation, and to your point, letting them ask that question, letting them see what it means to them, and ultimately you want them to be a torchbearer and carry some part of it. Yeah, I actually hadn't thought of it this way, so thank you for sharing that. It helps me think of this differently as well. Before we started recording today, I was briefly telling you about the writers' workshop that we have during the festival, and we are trying to for it to be sort of a curtain raiser for something that we'll build year long. But South Asian writers at every stage, we are hoping they'll be in the room. And some of them may be holding a manuscript that they've never shown to anyone. You built a career writing stories with no blueprint from a tradition no major imprint had ever centered. What do you say to that writer in the room?
I would say that if you love it, then it's worth everybody else knowing about it. The way that we access the universal is through the specific. And there are incredibly moving pieces of art that strike, like they can be wildly out of this world and they still move us. So when you feel as though there's no blueprint for what's already there, you also have the blueprint of all human emotions, which link us from time immemorial. Uh, I was reading recently about the history of birthday candles, which I know is so very, very silly, but I was thinking about where it came from. Why have we done this? And it went back and back to this idea of wanting to, like an ancient idea of just protecting a loved one, protecting a child even. There is something that I have in common with a mother from thousands of years ago. We don't speak the same language, we don't look the same, we don't eat the same things, but we both have eyes in the back of our head and we both have that extra ear of, oh, someone's upset. Like there are things, there are more important ways of connecting than seeing a blueprint. The fact that there's no path doesn't mean that the roots aren't there. And I think that that's something that can help you feel less lonely when you're trying something which, for all intents and purposes, is new.
When you can't see the roots, they still exist. How amazing is that? I love that. Aru Shah starts by lighting a lamp she was told never to touch. She does it because she wants to be seen. It costs everyone around her everything. And then she spends 5 books discovering the lamp was always hers to light, that she was always the one the story was waiting for. That is also the story of a writer. And your name, as we were talking about it earlier, means light itself. Someone who lit the lamp when a lot of people were, casting doubt, and went ahead and wrote tradition no one had written yet. In your own mind, what lamp did you light?
I'm not certain. I think I'm still figuring out what the heck I lit. I think maybe I'll get to the end of my life and think, oh, I know what it is, and then I'll die. So
you cannot without answering us. That's a cliffhanger we'll not allow.
I think it's important to be a mystery to yourself. There's so much for artists. A lot of what we do is pretty isolating and navel gazing. It's just, I walk around, I change from my night pajamas to my day pajamas, and I walk in a circle and I talk to myself, and my cat tries to kill me and my kids try to eat me. And, that's just every single day. And I wouldn't change it for anything.
Yes.
But so often what I'm trying to do is figure out how I feel. That's it. I can spend a whole year trying to figure out how I feel about something. And I just ask the same question over and over. And clearly I have no answer because I'm 15 books in and still asking the exact same question.
Then in that case, I would love for you to continue asking that question, because the books are fascinating. And if I were to answer that question, I think you lit a lamp for so many kids, so many people who now probably aspire to write, who now probably aspire to claim the space and be at the center of something, proudly so, because you lit that lamp. And it's important.
I'm very honored to hear that.
Roshani, this conversation I'll carry with me for a long time. Like I said, I have enjoyed every bit of what you said, from deeply profound to all our funny takes. And I wish I could go on. And I don't consider today's conversation to be one and done. I just foresee you and us having this continued dialogue, and you have an open invite forever to Chicago Indian Literature Festival. Hopefully we'll have you there next year, and I know my kids would be cherishing today's conversation. Like I was telling you earlier, they were very, they were reminding me again and again that no matter what I do, I shouldn't forget that I have this podcast recording today. And I made them proud by showing up. To everyone listening, Roshani Chokshi is one of the most amazing, profound, funny writer in American fiction today. Her books are for children who've never seen themselves in a story. They're for anyone who's been handed a fate they did not choose and wondered if the story has room for who they actually are. This is Chicago Indian Arts, and this is why we exist. These conversations, these amazing writers, and these stories. We'll be back again soon with another episode with someone really amazing like Roshani. And would love to see all of you at Chicago Indian Arts and our literature festival on May 30th at Congress Plaza. Details and tickets at chicagoindianarts.org. Until next time, this is me, Sarveshi Shukla, signing off.